All right, Maurice Carlos Ruffin, 2023 Louisiana Award, Writer Award recipient Maurice Carlos Ruffin is the author of The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You, which was longlisted for the Story Prize and was a finalist for the Ernest J. Gaines Award for Literary Excellence. And We Cast a Shadow, which was a finalist for the Penn Faulkner Award, the Penn Open Book Award, and the Dayton Literary Peace Prize. Ruffin is a professor of creative writing at Louisiana State University, and he is here today to talk about this book that dropped in February, it was? In February, The American Daughters. Y'all give it up for Maurice Carlos Ruffin. So Maurice,
Megan.
I got a memory notification on Facebook the other day from the night we met. We have been knowing each other a decade now. It's a long time. And a decade ago, I met Maurice as an essay writer. You had a piece on gentrification of St. Claude Avenue in Unfathomable City in New Orleans Atlas. And then I know you had another essay on gentrification in Ferret and beyond in Uptown. So then you turn around and you drop some fiction. And I know you've been dabbling in poetry as well. So can you talk about what it's like sort of working across genres? Because not a lot of authors can do that well, and you do.
Well, thank you for that lovely intro. All right, so ma'am in the back with the black shirt, can you hear me right now? Kind of, sort of. It's really echoing in the back, I know that. It's a big chamber. All right, are you folks ready to pass some laws? Huh? Ready for that? So this idea of cross-genre, I mean, the way I see it is that it's almost like if you're making a meal for your family, you know, in one night you make some Italian, the next night maybe you make some Mexican, the next night you do some Creole. You're just using almost the same ingredients to make different sort of things. So for me, I find pleasure in different forms. In fact, I have my mentor, James Nolan, is right back here in the black shirt, a lovely teacher who taught me so much about being an author. And you know, Mr. Nolan himself, I mean, he's written poetry, he's written short stories, he's written a couple of novels, he's taught memoirs, of course, memoirs as well. And I just realized that it's all the same thing. You know, it's all storytelling. You know, a lot of writers, I'm just curious, how many of y'all out there are writers? Written anything, just written anything, period. Yeah, a few hands. You know, writers often have writer's block. But you know who never has writer's block? 6-year-olds. You know, if you ask a 6-year-old, what did you do at school today? And they would just start, and they won't stop till you stop them, because storytelling is so natural for us as people. So when I think about writing, you know, an essay about gentrification, or a short story about two kids who, you know, are playing hooker from high school, or a poem, to me, it's all part of the same space. And by treating it that way, I don't get too nervous about it, too precious about it. I do have a special love for poets because that's a really particular mindset. But I can get into that space sometimes if I, you know, burn some sage and light some candles and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask the same question, actually. Black shirt, can you hear me in the back? All right, I can project. And you know why I can project? Because I get it from my mama.
Yeah.
And that leads us into the dedication of this book for our mothers. It's not only the dedication of the book, but it's a line that pops up over and over and over again inside the book itself. And yes, it's also on the cover. So can you talk a little bit about that dedication and that line and its larger significance in this book?
Yeah, I just think that as a writer, it's not my job to tell my story so much as it is to tell the stories of people and communities that I love. So I write for my ancestors, and I write for, you know, people that I've met in my life. But of course, my mother is so important to me. I was just talking to her like 10 minutes ago. That's why I was almost late. She's like, "What are you doing this afternoon, son?" I'm like, "Well, I'm going to go to the house chamber and, you know, talk to some people about a book." And she was like, "I'm very proud of you, son." But you know, my point is that I think that when I was younger, I think it's kind of hard to say this, but like for a lot of young men, I think it's hard for us to understand the women in our lives. You know, our mothers and sisters and aunties, if we don't pay like really particular attention to that. So I made it a point about 10 years ago to start asking my mom a lot of questions about her life, her history, her ancestors, and her sort of struggles and triumphs. And it changed my entire mindset. And I know a lot of guys are often not very good at writing about women, But my mission was to do like the stories of her and her ancestors justice as much as possible. And so once I finally got to that space, and it felt very natural to me to just tell the stories. And so it gives me a lot of pleasure. Like who is Maurice Ruffin? Like you go to the airport to see the book, and you're like, and you kind of go, you see my picture, wait, a man wrote this? I'm like, well, yes. Because for me, it's just hearing the voices, hearing the spirits, hearing how they would tell the stories. And one small example of that is that, this story is set in the 1840s to the 1860s. And so there's going to be some violence happening. But I think in sort of male-centric stories, that's visualized a lot. You can like see that trauma so much on the page. And I'm like, look, if my great-grandmother, times 5 in like 1880 is telling the story, she's not going to focus on that. She's going to focus on the joyous moments. Like her and her girlfriends, they're going to like go kill some Confederates, but they're like cracking jokes and making finger sandwiches, that kind of thing. So I'm trying to get to that space more than anything else. Although I should admit, my mentor James, he mentioned, he's like, Maurice, in a few of your books, you took out the mother at a certain point in the story, either like sort of metaphorically or whatever. And I'm like, I hadn't really thought about that. But when I thought about it, this is what I realized it was after you asked me that question, is that for me, the women are so powerful, like because of their like vision of their family and because of their community, that if they're always like in the barrier, they can stop the bad guys. So it's like, all right, just send her over here for a while or take her out completely and see what that does to the story. Because, sometimes the dads are like, what's happening? I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
But the mothers are like on point. And so you're definitely trying to make space for conflict in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, by the way, I'm still not over the disappearance of the mother in the first book. I'm
that's
still
this one
mad
right
about that. So he will write out the mother so well that you'll be mad 5 years later. Just so you know.
It was totally intentional.
Totally intentional. So thinking about the front of the book, right, there's not only that dedication, there's also these 3 epigraphs. I love an epigraph, and yours are from Megan the Stallion. They are from, I'm flipping now. Yeah,
for those who don't know, Megan Thee Stallion is a popular performer and rapper and dancer out there right now. She's like 6 foot tall, that's why she's a stallion.
She spells Megan correctly as well.
Yes, she does.
One's from Assata Shakur and one's from Gwendolyn Brooks. So I was wondering if you might read those 3 epigraphs and tell us why you picked them.
Oh, sure. I love a good epigraph. I know some people don't like epigraphs very much. I don't understand that, but I love it. To me, it's like setting the table. It's like, getting the air freshener out there before you start walk to the house. All right, 3 quick epigraphs. The first one is from Gwendolyn Brooks, the wonderful author. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. That's number 1. Number 2, love is contraband in hell because love is an acid that eats away bars. And that's Assata Shakur. And then lastly, Megan Thee Stallion. Once you really know yourself, can't nobody tell you nothing about you. And I just picked those because, I'll write the book first, because there's also an epigraph at the beginning of this one and in this one. This one, I think, is Ellis Marcellus. This one is Nabokov from Ralph Ellison. I'm trying to figure out what is the story about, what is the sort of moral of the story, what I want you to think about. And then I just go back and I say, well, who said like good things about this idea? And I put it there. And again, for me with this one, it was like ancestors, Assata Shakur and Gwendolyn Brooks, people from the past who had these really strong ideas about loving community, loving your sisters, those kinds of things. And then Megan is like right now, she's like probably on stage tonight somewhere performing, and then putting that right here in the front. So you kind of go, okay, this is the journey we're going to be on, and setting you up like that. Yeah.
And I feel like all 3 of the women who wrote the epigraphs are in some way, shape, or form about liberation.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is what the women in this novel are about as well. I am not going to do spoilers, so I'm not going to get too deep into the plot. But what I will ask about is probably my favorite part of the plot, and that's the love story. It was so beautiful and so unexpected. Why was that so necessary for this book?
I didn't expect it either. And people tend to like the love story, although a few were shocked and surprised by it for different reasons. But what I'll say is this. There's a movie. So I'm a big believer. So I teach at LSU. I got a little pendant right here, a little lapel pin. In LSU, I teach creative writing. I teach in other programs around the country. I travel. I teach. I taught here yesterday at the festival. And I'm always telling my students that, yes, of course you want to read books to get ideas about how to do craft, how to get ideas, how to make plots, talk to your friends, talk to your mentors, talk to little kids. I'll go to a high school and I'll ask the kids, what are y'all watching right now? And they will always say, oh, some anime, some Japanese cartoon from 20 years ago, Attack on Titan, 100-foot tall zombies that eating people. I'm like, why are you into this? And they'll say, because of this. It feels like America today. I'm like, oh, well, okay, I guess you're okay, kids. But my point is, you can always find interesting ideas. So with that relationship, I had written an entire 2 drafts of this book where that was not a part of the story at all. Mm-hmm. And then I watched a movie called Portrait of a Lady on Fire from 2018. It's this wonderful love story set in France, in the 1800s or 1600s. And I was like, that's these 2 characters. That's their relationship. That's how they interact. There's this sort of resistance against male, dominance. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to use that, put it in here, see how. And also, strangely enough, Bridgerton, the Netflix show. Yeah, I can't explain what it was about that, but just little moments. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And the sort of the petticoats and the dresses and the little, the scarves and that kind of thing. So I am what they call a sort of metafiction writer or a maximalist. I use influences from everywhere, constantly to make my little soup taste better. And it's just a part of my practice as a writer. Yeah.
Right on. So in addition to the love story, I feel like research was such an essential part of this novel. I was looking on page 23 last night, and you see this bill of sale from a slave auction, right? And that auction bill of sale looked so much like one that I saw at the Historic New Orleans collection in terms of the detail, in terms of the name, in terms of the listing. And even though it's a work of fiction, you realize how meticulous that research process had to be in order for this book to feel as real as it does. And there are other moments when there's sort of faux historical documents in there as well, and they all feel like actual historical documents. So can you talk to us a little bit about your research process and also why the need to sort of replicate those documents was in here?
No, thank you for that, Megan. It's several ideas. First of all, I did a lot of research for this book. I mean, this book is set 1844 to 1862, and I didn't think of myself as a historical fiction writer, really not at all. I mean, I love history, I love fiction, I love all these things, but as I was writing the book, I kept realizing the limits of my knowledge. A very small example was there's a scene about midway through where the main character is being brought into the French Quarter to get glasses. And I'm trying to write the scene, I'm like, wait, there's no lens crafters in 1840, whatever, where do you get glasses at? And so, if I had time, I would go to the French Quarter, go to the Historic New Orleans collection, go into the archives, find some little book and read it. Oh, that's how you do it. I was out of time, so I literally went on Twitter, when it was still Twitter, and I DM'd a friend I know, a guy named Dan. I was like, Dan, help, 1857 glasses, where do you get them at? And he's like, oh, no big deal. 1857, you would just go to a jeweler, and the jeweler would have the equipment, the frames, and he would cut the glass for you and that kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, thanks a lot. Now I can finish the scene. That's minor stuff. Now, big things is reading books by other amazing scholars and reading other writers who I've read their books about the past and how things were treated and putting context. It's having conversations and so, you said that your ancestors in 1900 did this. Well, tell me more about that. But what happens is the more research you do, the more confident you feel. And you can sort of, at that point, when you started out, you were playing the trombone, in the high school band, womp, womp. But then later on, you've learned a few things. It's the saxophone or the clarinet. It's very detailed and beautiful and articulate. And so now I feel I understand these people and this time very well. And the documents were all a part of that. Because, for example, I kept thinking, okay, so in the opening scene, my subconscious said, you're going to show the little girl being brought from the rural plantations / slave labor camps, into the city in 1844. But what is that sale process like? Were they brought to the French Quarter? There's gonna be maybe several sites in current hotel locations. There's a guy, there's a Paul Giamatti in that 12 Years a Slave. He's checking the teeth. This one is worth that much. I'm like, okay, more about that. And then I realized, well, okay, how would you even find out that there was a sale happening that day? Well, there's no internet. There's no email. There's just a post, and they just put a little poster up there, and it says, a 20-year-old young mulatto woman, she's an excellent hairdresser, cooks really well, and speaks 3 languages. I'm like, oh, very interesting. And so I'm like, I'm gonna put that in the book, because I'm trying to create this space that feels both real and fictional. And a last basic example is that I remember reading, I'm kind of a snob, so it took me a long time to read Stephen King. So when I was in my late 20s, I read Carrie, and in Carrie, there's actual articles from newspapers that he made up. I'm like, why does this feel so real? So it makes you feel like this is an actual real story being told the entire time. So I have, I think, 6 inserts. I have a map of the city at that time period. And to me, it makes you kind of get drawn into the story, and it takes you out of your real life for a period of time, which we can all use that, nowadays especially. Yeah.
Yeah, and toward the beginning, you bring the little girl, right? But that's not the beginning. The structure of this book is so fascinating, y'all. If you haven't read it yet, it begins in the way distant future, and then it goes to the night that things went awry for some Confederates. Let's just put it that way. And then you go into a more linear narrative that more or less ends with the night that things went awry for some Confederates. And then you go back into the distant future. Can you tell us how you came up with that? And it's seamless. It just works. It flows.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. So first of all, it's not really even a spoiler. Right here on the cover is the main character. And she's carrying a tray with some decanters and bottles on it. And I'll just tell you, because you find out immediately, they're full of poison. And so there's these planners, as they were called euphemistically in the old days, and they're having a sort of bro meeting. They're drinking and eating, nuts and cheese, and they're just smoking cigars, good old boys type meeting. And she's telling you immediately, she's like, I got to take these guys out. But I know that if I try this, I may not survive, and the person I love may die in the process too. And so for me as a writer, we all have our own sort of techniques and tendencies, I know I keep on saying James Nolan, but for him, so when I took his class, he was the one that taught me how you can always have some humor happening inside of a story in these really sort of dark moments. And so there's some of that too. But with this story, I was thinking, okay, what do I usually do, and how can I do the opposite of that? So usually my stories end with this sort of opening scene, like an explosion, and you sort of follow the character being flying across the world basically from that moment. And I say, what's the opposite of that? I'm gonna start at the very last moment of the story, and then jump back to the beginning, and then move forward and see how that feels. And then lastly, I'm always trying to find a way to get the reader hooked immediately. Some writers, they have a lot more, maybe, self-confidence. They'll start really slow, 80 pages in, when is this story gonna start, But you're into it. I'm no. I want you to read 10 pages and then go, I gotta tell my friends about this. How's he doing this? Oh my goodness. So those are all parts of my considerations, and it's just my personal preferences as a writer. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you drew attention to the cover again, because it looks like we're going to talk about all the parts of this cover. So we talked about four mothers, we talked about the main characters. Now we're going to talk about these birds. The main character's nickname is Hummingbird. There's hummingbirds, but that's not the only bird. There's a character nicknamed Dove of Peace. There's the Mockingbird Cafe, where a lot of really pivotal moments in the book take place. So can you tell us about the birds? Why the birds, Maurice?
Okay, so I can't take credit for the birds on the cover. I can take credit for the birds in the book.
Yes.
One of my rules for a book is that I want to make sure my books have really attractive covers. So that way, if you hate the book, you still leave it on your counter, on your coffee table or whatever like that. And I can point out another friend. So this is Miss Price, Professor Price, is the author of I'm Always So Serious, a book of poetry. She teaches at Tulane, and this is my my twin over here. She has this amazing cover. Just Google I'm Always So Serious, and the cover has this person on there who looks just like Charisma, but it's not Charisma. And so it's very mysterious. What is happening here? There's a persona thing happening, and so I'm always trying to make you have questions about the book covers. But what I love about artists is that they always have their own interpretation. So my first book, has these, an apple with some spots on it. I didn't make that up. But he's okay, I see. The main character is obsessed with his son, so the apple doesn't fall from the tree. There's a disease happening. Okay, thank you. I like that a lot. This cover, this is my second book. It's short stories. It's called, what's it called? I forgot.
The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You.
The Ones Who Don't Say I Love You. We found this cover on Instagram. Some guy bought a Creole cottage in the Bywater in New Orleans, took a picture, put this arm on it like this with some flowers, and I just found it. I'm we're going to use that. We're going to pay the guy for the picture. It looks like my hand, giving you some flowers. And then this cover is interesting because this is actually a real painting from 1890. It's by an artist named something Waterman or Waterhouse. he went to Vermont or Maine, like in 1890, into the rural areas, and it was like just finding locals and like painting their portraits. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, that looks kind of like my Adi. And then the birds were added after the fact. So Random House said, we need some more zhuzh, a little bit like some plumage on it. And so they added that. And the idea of the bird metaphor, I mean, look, birds for us are symbols of freedom. And so my subconscious was saying, hey, look, if you have these like 7 women, you know, you have Adi, you have Lenore, you have Sanite, you have little Jennifer, you have Alabama. They're all fighting for freedom. Well, okay, why not birds? Why not birds? And of course, you know, there's a little humor there. Again, like as I've mentioned, one of the birds, Alabama, she's very rowdy. In my mind, she's like if you took like Harriet Tubman and Dolly Parton and like smashed them together like that to make a character. And so her nickname is the Dove of Peace. It's a joke. I mean, she's not that peaceful at all. So those things are all a part of how I was trying to conceive of these sort of metaphors in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, and all these nicknames, they speak to sort of this larger thread throughout the book, right? Because the characters are called one thing by the group of people who is in power, right? The people who are enslaving them. And then there's what they call themselves and what they allow their nearest and dearest to call them. And I was wondering if you could talk about that importance of naming throughout the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I'm sure some of you go by your middle name, for example, which is like a family thing for some people. Some of you have these like really long names, so they're kind of hard to pronounce. And you're like, okay, I'm going to tell people to call me this. You know, some of you have friends who just decided to like give you a nickname out of the blue, and it's sort of stuck over time. You know, sort of things. You know, what your boss calls you is not what your mother calls you, what your best friend calls you. You know, Toni Morrison wasn't Toni Morrison. What was Toni Morrison's name? Who know that? Professor Price. Professor Price, what is it? Chloe Wolford. Her real name was Chloe Wolford. And she said she went to school and people couldn't pronounce it very well. Like, Chloe Wolford, it's a lot of L's, you know? So she's like, okay, fine. Forget about Chloe. I'm going to make a persona called Toni. And Tony's going to be immortal. And we'll forget who Chloe was. And she was right about that. And so for me, this idea in the book is I can use the names to show how close characters are to each other. So for example, very early in the book, the slave owner, this guy, he's just a total jerk, he decides to call the main character some other name. I forget what he calls her. Antoinette, thank you. He calls her Antoinette. He's like, I'm going to call you, I think your mother-given name is for heathens. Because her real name from her mother is Adebempe. Because her mother had been brought over like a few years before from Africa. And so he's like, I can't say Adebempe, I'm gonna call you, Antoinette. So obviously when you look at him, he's not seeing who she really is. He doesn't care who she really is. So he gives her a name against her will. Meanwhile, her mother calls her Adebempe, her close friends call her Adi, just the short version of that. But then you look at it on the page, and people in the 21st century call her Addie because that's the more modern version. It's less French, less Creole, less quote unquote foreign. So these things are all layers and layers and layers of it. And even in the sort of the fictional documents, I play with the naming conventions. If you read close, you're like, wait, what did they call them in that part? And so I wanted it to feel slippery because one day somebody's going to tell your story in 100 years, and they're going to get a lot of facts wrong, like maybe the main parts, but most just wrong. And so that's all a part of the structure of the book, that history is always being retold by those in power and those who love that person who's the subject of the story. So that's all a part of the construction too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that you brought up Morrison just now because when I was reading the part about the names, it was giving shades of Beloved, right? The way that Baby Suggs names herself. Yeah. So that maybe her husband can find her one day.
Yes.
And the way that Stamp Paid names himself, right? So thinking about Morrison and how I know she's impacted you in so many ways. You've talked about that a lot. But also thinking about you as a writer. When I met you 10 years ago, you were, I don't even think in the MFA program yet.
I think I had just finished. I was trying to forget about it.
You just finished it? Okay, cool. And, you're getting all these rejections and you're writing nonfiction. And I know you've talked a lot about how you got better during that time. And every time I read a new book by you, I'm like, how did he get better, right? Because when you're just starting out, it's really easy, I think, to get better. But when you're already a New York Times selling best author and you've got all of these fellowships and awards and prizes and you keep getting better, what's your practice like right now to keep getting better?
Oh, my goodness. These are some good questions. But, of course, it's Megan doing this. So I think it really comes down to community. I've already shot out several, peers and friends and mentors, Professor Nolan, Professor Price. My good friend Susan Kagan, we were in the same writing group for over a decade, and like just being amongst like other writers trying to create cool things and like trading our work back and reading out loud to each other. And like, I got to embarrass my friend Che. So Che Yoon is one of this is my bestie from grad school, like UNO over a decade ago. Really like one of the best writers I've met in my entire life. And I would like read Che stuff and I would go, how can I be as good as this one day, potentially? And she had this attitude of like, well, art is something you just create from the heart. You just go for it. Like, don't hold back ever. Like, don't save your good writing for the future. Write your good writing right now. And I never forget one time there was this thing that happened where I was trying to write something. And what did she say? Oh, that's what it was. We were talking about the idea of potentially winning prizes one day. Or just, no, what is your future goals? It's like, Maurice, what do you want to do in your future goals? Well, I want to publish a story in like a literary magazine, like at LSU one day. And she was like, that's it? That's all you want to do with your little stories? I said, what do you want to do, Chick? She says, well, I want to get a Pulitzer one day. And I was like, I felt like I was that tall, but it made me think about my actual goals. I wasn't being honest. I wanted to be a really good writer. I wanted to have people read my books, have an audience, to be able to travel around the country, to be able to go to Europe or to go to South America on my books. I went to Africa last year on my books, And that's my actual goal. So having that honesty in your own heart makes the work more honest. And honestly, I mean, look, I love my first book. I think I did a great job. But as I've learned, it's become less about me and more about the characters, my ancestors. And so I've gotten stronger as I've gone like towards them and from myself. So now it's not like, what am I going to do to this? It's like, no, what's my great uncle doing in like 1930? That's a cool story. What's my cousin doing in 1999? That's a cool story. And it's like, write it, and it feels a lot less stressful. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and thinking about, so the relationship between his books, if you guys read in the second book, The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You, Cesara Pittman or A Negress of God, I feel like she's Alabama's cousin.
Absolutely,
yes,
absolutely.
Absolutely. So this is going to be the last question I ask. We're going to leave 10 minutes for you all to ask questions. Without giving too much away, I know you've talked about how this is the first book in a trilogy. Can you tell us a little bit about the other two that are coming?
Yeah, sure. I'll answer that question. Then we're going to pass some laws after this.
Yes.
Get your drafts ready. So, I mean, first of all, I'm a New Orleans writer, so my books are almost always set in New Orleans. And so I feel very lucky to be a New Orleans person because there are so many untold stories. And so I'm going to go wide and deep and high and back and forward. And so this book was set in the future, this sort of future dystopian thing about this weird guy like running for office who's like just says inappropriate things, kind of like now. I was writing the book, this is like 2016, I finished the book, I'm like, I'm not writing fast enough. Like, it was outpacing me. So that was that book. This book was, okay, what do I love in New Orleans fiction that I've never seen? Well, a great collection like Sherwood Anderson from 100 years ago. He has this great, book, but he was an Ohio guy. Where's the New Orleans collection? Like all black characters, well, mostly black characters. Well, I wrote that for myself. What do you want to write? What you want to read? That kind of thing. And then I had the great honor of being the Grisham Fellow at Ole Miss. And so I stood in Grisham's house for a full academic year. This big mansion in the woods had two little ponds and a tennis court. It was so luxurious. And I felt like, so privileged to have that experience. But there were some creepy moments also. Like one night, I shouldn't even tell the story in public, but we're all friends, right?
Absolutely.
I was minding my business in the kitchen one night, and I saw these trucks coming up the road. There's like a long road goes to the house by itself. And I kind of ignored it. And I just went to bed. In fact, it was the night of the election this is 2020, so that was Biden versus Trump election, debate number 2. I watched the debate, go to sleep, and I wake up, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and you like feel something's kind of off? And I was like, what is going on? And so I'm on the second floor bedroom, and there's nobody else with me, so I heard footsteps in the hall. And I'm in rural northern Mississippi. I'm a middle-aged black guy by myself, right? And I'm like, okay, my loved ones aren't here, thank goodness they're all back in New Orleans. And I'm like, you got 2 choices, Maurice. There's the door, you just open the door and see who's out there, or there is a window on the second floor, and you just jump for it and see what happens. And I'm not good at climbing or jumping, so I'm like, all right, Grandma, this is it, let's see what happens. I go to the door, open the door. No, in fact, I didn't open the door. I yelled through the door, is anybody out there? Somebody goes, it's just us. And I'm like, maybe the window's a good idea. I open the door, and there's two guys, and they're in deputy uniforms. One is a little bit older, one's a little bit younger, and I'm like, Jim Carrey voice. Hey guys, what's going on tonight? What are you doing here right now? And they were like, we didn't know anybody was here. Long story short, there were some deputies like either doing a training in the area, or they were like tracking some juveniles who had escaped. Something was going on. I'm like, Maurice, just stay calm as hell. But then they left like a couple hours later. And that night I wrote this scene of this mother sitting at a counter in Mississippi. She's a black lady. And she had found a bullet casing on the door jamb when she brought her kids home from the groceries. And so she sends the kids upstairs to get some sleep. And she's sitting at the counter with a knife in her lap the entire night. And that became the origin of this book. And I started writing this in December of 2020. And I didn't stop till I had 700 pages. This book's only 300 pages. What happened to the rest of the pages? Well, the middle pages are the same family, the same line in the 1940s about a bunch of young black women who joined the military and come back to New Orleans from Europe during World War II to make the first generation of activists in that early 1950s generation. And I kept going to the future. The 400th anniversary of New Orleans, 2118, where they're descended way in the future, is having their own issues with mass incarceration and economic issues. And so I'm just going for it. I got all these ideas to write. I got 7 novels in my head right now, and 2 craft books and a memoir and a poetry book, and I'm just gonna keep on keeping on. Yeah.
Keep on keeping on, yes indeed. All right, I'm gonna open it up to y'all's questions, and I know for a fact there is someone in the audience who has a good one. Y'all give it up for my sister, Brittany.
Hey, Brittany.
So the question in a nutshell was, is he intentionally channeling The Handmaid's Tale at the end?
Yeah, 100%, I absolutely am. Look, every time we think that things are cool for women in the world, some clown in politics goes, no, it's not. We're going to overturn some law or pass some new law or say some crazy thing. And so for me, Handmaid's Tale is like a top 5 book. I've read that book 3 times. I love that book. And if who's read Handmaid's Tale? Anybody read Handmaid's Tale? Remember at the end of the book, there's this epilogue? The book itself takes place in Gilead, right? Gilead in the future, after America has fallen. But the epilogue takes place about 200 years after that. So I use the same idea in my book. Because the idea is, look, we're pretty smart, good people. But our descendants, they're going to go, man, what a bunch of dummies. They didn't understand anything about nothing. They drank cow's milk and wiped their butts with paper. I don't understand any of this stuff. So my idea was to go in the future and have this sort of satellite view of the story and kind of go, well, this is what they got right, this is what they got wrong, this is what we know, this is what we've made up, and sort of mix that into the pot together and again make a good brew and see where it goes, Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? This guy.
Oh, thank you.
Did your trip to Africa give you extra inspiration to keep writing about New Orleans?
Great question. We only got 4 minutes left. Time is flying. Absolutely. I went to Africa last August. I was sent there as a scholar. There's a program called the Black Rock Synagogue Program. Spent an entire month in this beautiful house on the coast. How do I get to do these things? I'm not a rock star. I'm not an actor, but I'm there and I'm going around the country. I'm visiting different communities, villages. I'm going to rural areas, and the entire time I was there, I kept thinking, every day was 10 new books. To be in this milieu, this sort of capitalist American view. I love my country. I really do. I'm not one of these anti-American people, but their view of life is so different from ours, and they are so much chiller than us. They're not stressed out. They're not tripping. They're just yeah, we're doing okay. One thing I learned over there was this. I kept asking about drug use and gun use. I kept asking mothers and kids. I'm what's with the guns and the drugs? I'm drugs and guns? What are you talking about? And the short version of the answer is this. if you use drugs in Senegal, your great-grandmother, who's still alive, because they're very healthy, she will know about it in 30 minutes. And you will feel so much pain, like embarrassing your family line, that whatever pleasure you got from whatever you use will just dissipate immediately. So why use it? So that community social pressure keeps them in line in a good way. Now, there's some downsides to that also. I mean, in this country, we're very individualistic. But just sort of seeing that play out gave me a lot of good seed for the future, and I'll keep using that. Thank you for the question. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we all know, those neighbors who, if you messed up, your mom knew about it before you got home. Yep. Absolutely. Anybody else? Questions in the remaining 3 minutes we have in this session? All right, Emily. More of a comment than a question. You're a rock star.
I appreciate it.
Okay, James has a question.
Yeah, no, that was probably somebody else. What was the question?
The question was, you read an article by Maurice about when...
Yeah.
Right.
No, I can clarify that.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yes. No, you're absolutely correct. And I remember that article. That wasn't me. I think the interview wasn't on the game. So for people, if you can't hear what Mr. Nolan's saying, so the question was whether or not I put in the book that New Orleans fell to the Union in 1865. And no, I stopped the book in 1862 because that's where they're arriving. Yeah, and I'm trying to basically like set up this. This is the idea behind that, and this is my last comment. I kept asking myself, why was it in all the cities across the South where the Union came down, the Confederacy fought really hard? And so during the Confederate monuments controversy, when they sort of pulling the things down, like I'm crazy. I would go to the monument, like see the neo-Confederates with their little flags, and put the Jim Carrey voice on. Hey guys, what's all this monument stuff about? And they would get really excited. Well, we got to protect, states' rights and the heritage, and but then I would ask them. I'd say, whoa, wait a second. What happened to the Confederates in New Orleans? And they get really quiet and sad. And the reason why is the Confederates did not fight New Orleans. I asked myself for 20 years, why did they not fight New Orleans? And my theory is the book. The theory is very simple. Union's coming down from the north to attack them. And meanwhile, inside the city is this linked unit of women who are sabotaging them behind the scenes, stealing their horses, breaking their guns, putting glass in their grits, poisoning their whiskey. And these guys we can't fight the outsiders and the espionage group at the exact same time. So burn your uniforms, go hide, fight another day, and that's the book's foundation basics. So great. Yes. And those are some of your ancestors too, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like when Butler shows up, Butler's like, hello, how you doing? I'm here to liberate the city and that kind of thing. So it's a very complicated history, and my job is to kind of decide what lens I want to put on it. Because again, if Tarantino makes this book, these ladies have 2 lines in the entire book, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm using my personal politics to decide where to sort of throw the attention in the book, and that's why it's written how it's written. Yes, it does, yes.
We could talk about this very fine book that ends in April 1862 all day, but we are out of time. Thank you, Maurice, for a lovely 45 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you all for being a beautiful audience.
And all right.
That's a good time.
Yeah, look, you're the boss.